reflective and consisted of characteristics such as emotions, sensations, perceptions, values, goals, and motives. I feel that. My interest in this problem seems obsessive. The last level, meta-self-awareness, was the highest level according to Moore in 2006. Meta-self-awareness was being aware of one's awareness. I'm aware of feeling vulnerable, or I am currently analyzing my current state of feeling vulnerable. From a pool of 50, 13 responded in writing, 8 were interviewed twice. All of these leaders were in positions of responsibility. Most ran their own companies or organizations. These leaders were from different areas across the country. The participant sample included both men and women. The ages of the participants were from 39 to 63. Most were running their own organizations. The study required at least 10 years of leadership experience. Most of the participants had a lot more. These are not the real names of the participants. All of these leaders were successful in their practices with many followers and much recognition for outstanding accomplishments. All were candid in expressing their views. Amy said, "I need to be in command. I have no natural tendencies that get in my way. I don't feel I have anything to overcome. Everything I need as a human being and as a leader, I have." Amy was a brilliant attorney, ran her own law firm that provided a valuable service to the disabled community. She referred to herself as an actor. Her success was dependent on being able to work with the truth in such a way as to get around judicial bureaucracy and get her clients the results they needed. She did what she had to do, even if the truth was stretched or skirted. She has been successful in her career by not being authentic and by not revealing her true feelings. She was proud of this. Her community values her. Hope said, "I normally keep my emotions inside. There are very few people who know the real me." Hope is self-aware and at times is authentic, especially when she is with people she knows well. She is a leader in a school system working with at-risk and underserved students. She loves her students and cares about their well-being. When her board wanted her to bring Scientology to the schools, they sent her for a week of Scientology camp. She returned determined not to let the program enter into her schools. To prevent this, she altered the school's accounting records so that it looked like they could not afford the program. This is one of the best examples of what seemed to be consistent behavior with most of the participants. They often seem to have good intentions and achieve their ends, but in doing so did whatever they had to. Lie, cheat, steal, deceive in order to get there. Lastly, it was amazing to find Don. He said, "I think candor and being straightforward and being positive is much more important than anything we can do. You have to be who you are and work with your strengths and have the people around you make up for your flaws. Authenticity is an innate part of our business. There's only one reason why people come to us. It's because they trust us." Don could not lie. When I asked if he could lie, would he? He responded, "I hope not." But Don had the perfect context for being both self-aware and authentic. He was the CEO of his own company. He reported to no one. He had no board. He hired and fired his own staff, and he even selected which clients he would work with. The question for Don from a prospective client was not, "Why should I work with you?" The question came from Don, who often put his prospective clients to the test. "Why should I take you as a client?" Not only was the context right for authenticity, Don was the only one who had regular feedback. Moore in 2006 wrote about celebrities being the most self-aware and authentic. Don had a radio show 5 days a week and did a lot of other TV and radio appearances. According to Morin, it is when you are regularly faced with your own voice and your own image that you tend to be more self-aware. The constant scrutiny of the camera and the microphone provided Don with the feedback he needed to be self-aware and authentic. The data I was looking for in exploring how experienced leaders use self-awareness to make sense of their actions and practices in complex and chaotic environments were examples of self-awareness at different levels and authentic behavior. What I also got were examples of deception which, according to Roberts 2014 and Moore in 2006, pointed to a lack of feedback. In vivo coding was employed to analyze the actual language found in the qualitative data transcript. During in vivo coding, the transcript was read several times and searched for the participants' words and/or sentences that could give an understanding of their perceptions. Findings. The first one, if it is true that authenticity and self-awareness are the most important traits in leadership, then according to Morin and McMaster's 1999, behavior modification through interaction and feedback would be necessary for most of the leaders in this study. Second, self-awareness was present mostly at low levels. Most of the leaders in this study did not take time to reflect using private or meta self-awareness. Third, feedback essential to self-awareness was practically non-existent. Often when it was given or received, it was misunderstood, devalued, or perceived as a threat. Fourth, what was most notable was how deception played a part in many executive actions that were authentic in their origin and resolution. A leader who had inner morals and ethics would at times do anything they had to do, inauthentic, illegal, immoral, or otherwise, in order to achieve the result that met with their high morals and ethical standards. Game playing, diversion, lying, cheating were all part of the everyday lives of these leaders. For most, their jobs depended on deceptive behavior of some sort. Fifth, many instances of deception were used to achieve a certain outcome. This created misalignment between the original moral reasoning and authentic results. Because of this, other traits may need to be considered along with these two. Sixth, based on the participants in this study, it could be inferred that leaders do not seem to view self-awareness, authenticity, or feedback as critical. And last, it seemed like consistent, authentic behavior could only happen when the context for it was supported. This included control of one's environment and a strong and consistent feedback mechanism. The interview recordings were transcribed by hand. I'm talking now about my findings in terms of conducting research. And having done these by hand, every 12 minutes of conversation required 1 hour of transcription on my part. I found the act of transcribing my own interviews was more informative than if I had brought someone else in to do it. I strongly recommend that other researchers do this for some or all of their transcripts. Data coding and analysis led to a layer of understanding not only about each individual participant's contribution, but of the comparisons that could be made between each participant. The use of an authenticity framework by Roberts 2014 was valuable for keeping the research focused on specific outcomes, namely the execution of tasks that represented the inner morals and thinking of the leader. That combined with the use of the self-awareness theory of Moore in 2006, self-awareness theory and of Moore in 2006, those two theories provided insight into the different levels of self-awareness possible and a way to describe them. Understanding these levels will be useful in practice. We now have voices of leaders describing pure, authentic behavior, and we have examples of how end results we reach through authentic behavior and through deception. This study allowed us to process this phenomenon by studying leaders describing these actions in their own words. Given the difficult and complex circumstances under which leaders operate, according to Proddy, Douglas, and Ferris 2003 and Nesbitt 2012, and the prevalence of deception in their actions, this researcher suggests considering at least one other trait, conscience, for example, which was suggested by Covey in 2006, be added to the other two to balance out behavior and keep a check on deceptive practices. There are 3 recommendations that came from this research. The first recommendation was to find a way to get regular feedback. Feedback that came from others was not as effective as the internal processing that came from seeing and judging and analyzing one's own behavior. It is my strong recommendation that a part of the routine of a leader should include some viewing of their own behavior and listening to their own voice captured by recording of actual events and encounters. The second recommendation was the use of an executive coach. An executive coach could often provide good feedback, especially since many good feedback opportunities cannot be recorded. An executive coach who observes and shares with the leader can often be of great value, according to Gregory, Peck, and Carr, 2011. Training in self-awareness and authenticity was another recommendation. I found that an organization called Landmark Education provided effective training for leaders and others who would like to reduce the deceptive, misaligned, misleading behavior in their lives and develop self-awareness and authenticity skills and abilities. I actually took this training and found that it made a difference for me. This study was based on conversations with leaders. The same study could be valuable if conducted with students or any other follower population. I recommended a follow-on study to measure the impact of media feedback on leaders and its impact on performance. It is my intent to continue this work by using media as a tool with my clients. In summary, this was a qualitative narrative-based research based on the methods of Cresswell 2008 and Sparrow 2005. It was a study of experienced leaders and their self-awareness process. Roberts' 2014 authenticity theory was used as a framework, as was the self-awareness theory by Moore in 2006. How did experienced leaders use self-awareness to make sense of their actions and practices in complex and chaotic environments? Most of them didn't use self-awareness consistently or at all. When it was used, it was usually not at a cognitive level, private or meta level, which according to Moore in 2006 and Goleman 2001 are the levels where most learning was likely to occur. Deception was prevalent in leadership behavior. It was often necessary, expected, and even encouraged as part of the job. Whether or not a leader was successful depended on many factors, including those involved with context and feedback. While authenticity may have been desirable, it was not always possible or indicative of success. Self-awareness seemed to be an important component of leadership in the literature that was missing or underutilized by actual leaders. Making self-awareness a priority and understanding its impact on the environment could lead to massive leadership improvement if the right feedback mechanisms were in place. Thank you very much. I'll now take questions and comments.
All right, thank you, Pat. The first thing I wanted to do is thank you for your presentation. You did a great job. At this point, we'll open up the question and answer period. I'll defer to my second reader and also our third reader, and I'll allow them to begin their questions. Each one of the outside readers will have roughly two questions, and we'll go from there.
Hello, Pat.
I think Davina is trying to say something and we can't hear her.
Okay.
Oh, it's actually Margaret. So I don't know how to change the name tag. So I logged in as Davina. But Pat, I just wanted to say hello and congratulations. It was really wonderful to hear your story of your thesis process. So I just want to congratulate you on that. I'm going to take my camera off now that we saw me. So I thought you did a terrific job. This has been a real labor of love for you. For those that are on the call, Pat and I were in class together. She was in one of my classes, and so it's been neat to see her ideas germinate and grow, and you know, you really did an artful job with telling the stories of these fascinating leaders. So I just want to compliment you on that. So
thank you, Margaret.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, we're going to start out with methodology. So we've had many conversations about methodology, your research design, different choices that you had. And so I just want to talk to you for a couple of minutes about that. So my first question is, you brought up this idea of coding and your use of coding and your use of in vivo. I Again, I want to compliment you on transcribing your own audio interviews. That's a very painful process. I concur that you do get closer to your data, and you're one of the rare students who actually goes that route because it is so painful. So, but to that end, once you went through and you did this coding and used in vivo, can you tell us a little bit about, was there a process that you used to validate the codes that you came up with? Were there any other individuals that you might have used to check your codes, and tell us about that process?
Yes, thank you, Margaret. There was a process that I used. Every transcript was sent along with my codes to a second researcher. And that second researcher, without seeing my results, coded the same transcript. They then sent me their coded transcript to review. I did a comparison of my transcript and their transcript. Any discrepancies were discussed and reviewed in a meeting together.
Great. Thank you for that. That's yeah, no, that's just interesting to hear that process that you go through. Just like transcription, having someone else code, recode your work and double checking that is a time-consuming step. So it's just neat to hear you articulate that process. So related to that, and then I'll defer over to Terry. In terms of your coding, was there ever any piece of their story that you thought, oh, this is really juicy or this is really interesting, but gosh, when I look at my research question, I can't really fit this in anywhere? Or did everything fit nice and neat for you?
I think my biggest problem was that there was too much data. What you actually see in my research paper is maybe a tenth of what I actually got. So my problem was picking and choosing between different stories that people had. I was looking for really good examples of the different levels of self-awareness, and whenever I found one that was in the either meta or private level, I made sure to include that story because it was so rare to find that I thought that was important to make a part of the narrative.
Great, thank you. Brian, that will conclude my first round, and I guess I'll switch it back to you or to Terry.
Okay, this is Terry, and hi Pat, how are you?
Hey Terry, great, how are you doing?
Oh, not too bad. Just for yucks, let me see if I can get my video up there.
Hey!
Everybody at least knows what I look like. Hi Brian. This one won't last long. I'm going to shut that baby off. Okay. Interesting question on methodology, since what you were doing, what you did in your thesis was so totally different from things that I've done in my background, coming out of the world of engineering and operations and such. But I found your thesis quite interesting. It worked on the other side of my brain that I'm usually used to working with. But I did have a couple questions, and the first one really has to do with authentic behavior, and it may be well, let me just get to it and see where we go with it. Most people make a decision on college while they're still kids, teenagers. This could be as disparate as teaching, engineering, general business, or whatever. And as they go to college, they begin thinking about what's next. And again, different choices. They want to go to an advanced degree in a given discipline, engineering, law, medicine, whatever, or they want to hit the street for work. And I want to kind of focus on two different disciplines. Again, one, well, I won't say hard and soft in this case, but let's look at law and let's look at engineering. I'm an engineer. I can attest from my own experience that the thinking processes for professionals in these two areas are very different. And again, as a little bit of background, I've my major, I have a PhD in chemical engineering, but I had a minor in law. And I had an opportunity to take some courses at Harvard Law School. Engineering tends to be very fact-based. And what I learned very quickly about law was it tends to be what I call argument-based. That is where one can generally find a case supporting the desired outcome no matter which side you're representing. And it really depends on who can argue the best. Is it possible that lawyers and engineers are predisposed to that kind of thinking and gravitate to those professions? And if that's the case, wouldn't that mean that they're being authentic each in his or her own way, and that deception can be a result of self-awareness and therefore actually authentic? I go back to, I believe it was Amy, who was the lawyer, and talked about purposeful deception. And it was indicated, at least I read the thesis as saying that was inauthentic. But I'm saying, hey, isn't that really being true to their core if my first premise is correct? I'd love to hear you chat about that.
That's great. That's a great question. Well, there are a few parts to this question. I think maybe the best way to do this is to call your attention, Terry, to also Mary's narrative. Both Mary and Amy were in the law profession. And yet, now, so here's the thing, you go through school, you learn the theory, you learn about these things, and then you go out and you do them. And I haven't studied this, so a lot of this is my opinion, but looking at Mary and at Amy, what you have is, on the one side, Amy, who knew she was stretching the truth, knew that she had to do this to get results, and then Mary, who gave up. She was a circuit court judge who gave up her position, her very prestigious position, because she could not deal with the deception and the inauthenticity that she had to in order to be an attorney, in order to work with the law. So that might be an example of people with two different personalities, but of course one made it and one didn't. I guess once again the best way I can answer that is to say that I think, at least it's been my experience through myself, my students, the people around me, learning about a profession is one thing, entering into a profession is still yet another. My background is engineering as well, and I was not a gifted engineer, but I made it. I was an assembly language specialist in my day and did okay, but I have a feeling if you were to put you and me in a room together, you'd see two very different attitudes about it and two very different sets of talents and levels of talent. I'm not really sure what causes people to get into a certain profession, but there might be something to that, and it might be worth researching. So thank you for the question. Did I answer at least part of it?
Yeah, you did. It's interesting. And I confess, I hadn't really put Mary, juxtaposed her position to Amy. So that's why that's helpful. And maybe Amy was the one that actually had that predisposition, and Mary didn't, and Mary made a mistake when she went in there. But anyway, very good discussion, and I appreciate it. One more question, which is I'm going to dig down into some more specifics of your thesis per se, but in your section on self-awareness level 1, you state that at that level of self-awareness, actions were taken or observations were made with little or no self-awareness. And then you proceeded to give an example, and I just wanted to question that example and see if one might see it in two different ways. You said, and I actually pulled this quote out, you said, Ted believed that sometimes it was best to make a judgment quickly and adjust later depending on whether he was right or wrong. And to me, that kind of suggests maybe a more significant level of self-awareness, because he understands, apparently, that he doesn't know which is best, and he's going to choose, the best that he thinks, but he recognizes, he's self-aware enough to recognize, this could be wrong, but I know what I'm going to do to fix it.
Got it. Let me see. So here's my thinking about that. first of all, you're bringing up a very important point. To be a good leader, don't you often need to make spur-of-the-moment decisions? One of the things that Morin's theory does not discuss is the possibility of paralysis if you are too self-aware, or if you're using a higher level of self-awareness when it's not appropriate. I mean, there are times when a good leader needs to make a snap decision, a snap judgment, and sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong. And I think in the case of Ted at this point, Ted is a brilliant leader who sometimes is faced with this situation. I've got to decide, and I'm going to figure out later whether it's right or wrong. Now, he, in this instant, I do not believe, is looking at himself to say, how am I being self-aware about my decision? How am I judging my own behavior in the way I'm making this decision? And I think it's a good thing that Ted is not doing that. Now, he does, I believe, go later. He's the type of person who looks back later and is self-aware after the fact and says, okay, how did I do? Not only how did I do in terms of the environment, which again is a lower level of self-awareness, but how am I processing as a leader, and how is my self-awareness, am I aware, and am I operating as well as I need to operate? So I think there are two things going on there, Terry. Do you agree, or do you have another question that might clarify?
No, I think that's fine, and it's you know, unless we can get inside of Ted's head, I don't know that you can really figure out what was going on at the time, and if he's recalling it, he may not recall exactly what was going on at the time. So it's an interesting analysis, and I just wanted to throw out that possibility. I appreciate the answer.
I know this is sort of out of place here, but let me ask you a question. As a leader yourself, do you find that there are times when you've just got to act?
Oh, absolutely. Sometimes you're under such time pressures that a decision has to be made. There's no question. I've had that numerous times.
Yeah.
So yeah, interesting conversation. I appreciate it. Brian, those are my two questions for this round, so I will pass the baton on.
Okay. So naturally, one of the things that Pat, you've been able to do is do a great job. We'll have another round of questions around for our second reader, outside reader, and also if there's some guests, we'll take some questions from guests if they are interested in asking some questions on your work also. So I'll just open that up and we'll go from there.
Great. So I'll jump in for my second round, and I'm going to build off of the conversation you and Terry were just having. And you guys were playing around in the theory arena, which is where I wanted to go. And Pat, as you were responding to Terry's inquiry, you brought up what I think is a really neat point, a critique of Morin's work around the self-awareness, that you can, too much self-awareness can actually be paralyzing. So that would be, I think, a neat theoretical contribution. So, and what, what might be a way to overcome that. So that was one of your lenses that you use. I'm wondering if you could now switch gears and think about Robert's work. And if you were to critique Robert's, so Robert's work you used to help provide explanation around authenticity and authentic behavior. Is there something that Robert's work is missing or doesn't help explain?
I think Robert's work was excellent in covering all the basis in that multidimensional theory, which is why I latched onto it so strongly. My objection or my problem with Robert's theory is that he did not take this to the field. Referring back to the presentation earlier, there were quite a few authors who were talking about theory and leadership theory and how it hasn't been tested live. And as I was reading through what Roberts was saying, I was asking myself, if I only had Roberts' theory to read, would I understand? Would I really understand what authenticity is? And then to go out in the field and find my participants behaving in a way that matches his theory so that they do have authentic results and they do have authentic intentions, morals, beliefs, internal thinking, and to find such a disconnect in the alignment. The definition that I used at the beginning of the presentation was did not come from him, but came from many other people who referred to an alignment of behavior. So whether or not you could consider it authentic, according to Roberts, if the middle of your process was not moral, ethical, authentic, that's a question. That's something that I still struggle with. Does that answer your question, Margaret?
Let's stay with that a little bit. I mean, it does to some extent. So Roberts is a theory, and so that's what he's trying to do. And so you had a chance to try out his theory in the field, and you gathered these stories. So are you then saying if you were to meet Roberts, your suggestion to Roberts would be to modify his theory by building in this middle step process in which some other things could be going on?
Well, that's what I'm thinking. I have been myself in the field for a long time, and frankly, until I looked at Roberts' theory, I didn't see it. I didn't recognize what was going on. And I think, again, I think I have some question that's going to require future research that involves the middle of this process. And can we say that someone's behaving in an authentic way, according to Roberts, if their execution is unethical? I don't, I wish I had an answer to that today. So yes, I guess my thinking would be, if I spoke to Roberts, it would be interesting to share with him the results of the 8 people that I interviewed and say, what do you make of the middle part of this process?
Okay. So you felt as though Roberts helped provide some explanation, but that there's this outstanding element of it that your data seems to say his theory doesn't explain this part, and therefore it should be explored by somebody else. And I'm thinking back to your and Terry's discussion around, our professions and our disciplines and the way in which, these leaders are trained and we're trained. Because to act authentically in a particular profession may look different, just like it may look different in different cultures. So, maybe there's some sort of...
this is definitely, Margaret, that is such a great point. This is definitely based on Western leadership. I have worked with leaders in Japan, with leaders in China, with leaders all over the world, and much of what I'm talking about today would not apply. So that is definitely lacking in the theory, is that what he's talking about, and it's the same thing for Morin as well, those theories and the importance of these concepts are part of Western thinking and would not necessarily apply to my Japanese and Chinese clients.
Great. That's terrific. All right. I'm all set with that. Terry, I'll switch it over to you.
Thanks. Pat, I wholeheartedly agree with you on your, first on Margaret's point about the different cultures. Absolutely. What works in the West doesn't necessarily work elsewhere. I would extend the discussion a little bit even. Looking at different, we were talking about lawyers versus engineers and whatnot. I would posit that perhaps different jobs require different types of leaders, and by types of leaders I mean having different maybe ratios of the various traits that you're talking about, authentic behavior and deception and whatnot. The literature you cite, and we just discussed, talks about authentic behavior being an important factor in good leadership. In your mind, which is more critical to good leadership? Authentic behavior or authentic result? Does the authentic result, by definition, mean you have a good leader?
You know, I think if I could be an idealist for a second, I would say that the authentic behavior would be more important. But then if I put on my consulting hat and my realist hat, I don't know. Well, I found one person. I found one person who really could do it most of the time. But it's not practical. It's, I'd say, most of my clients might lose their businesses if I gave them that advice. And of course, we try to be aware when we're being deceptive or not quite truthful, or you know, if one of these less than moral aspects shows up. I wish we could live in a world that supported us all being authentic. But if my client is authentic and the person they're dealing with on the other side of the table, their customer or their board, doesn't understand that, they're going to get trounced. It's got to be something that everybody does. And so I would say if we could find a way to bring this to the forefront and make this more important, at least to realize that we're not being authentic, I think it would make a big difference to a lot of us. I think on a personal level, if not looking at leadership, if looking on a personal level, I think that the behavior might be more important. But certainly in business, it's very hard to just point blank say that to you when I know that my clients will lose money, income, all kinds of things. There's a huge expense for that. So I'm in a quandary about that question. Me personally, because as a result of this study, I am working very hard at being as authentic as I can and having authentic actions. It's hard. It's so much easier to lie. It's so much, well, or to not quite tell the truth or ignore something or to just be lazy about how I'm feeling about something. It's so much easier. I think it would be good for us all to look at that. And again, as far as leadership is concerned, I think we've got to take the business and organizational aspect into account, and I don't think we're ready for that.
Well, thank you. Your discussion really overlapped well into my next question, where you said about context. You said, according to the data in this study, if it was possible to be a great leader in less than ideal circumstances with compromised authenticity or self-awareness, then additional traits were needed for a leader to be successful. Number one, I think you have to have multiple traits. I don't think that any one trait can make you a good leader. And personally, I would define a great leader as one who's able to successfully navigate non-ideal circumstances. Because I'll guarantee you, now I don't know if I'm a great leader, but I've had some success, but I have never had the pleasure of ideal circumstances in any job that I've had. And I've known a number of Fortune 10 leaders, and none of them ever had the pleasure of leading under ideal circumstances. They always made the best with what they had. And that to me is what really makes a good leader. And you know, ideal circumstances can exist for short periods of time, but certainly not over any length of time for any particular leader.
Can I just
long-winded way, and really the question was very early on. I said different jobs require different types of leaders with different, perhaps, ratios of these traits. I'd like your commentary on that.
I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't believe when I found Don, who he exhibited everything that you'd hope to find if you were studying this. I don't know if I'll ever find another Don. I don't know if I went back and looked at him 5 months from now, if his circumstances changed, could he keep it up? I don't know, but it does exist.
Would Don be successful in another job, in a different type of job than what he was doing, or were those circumstances so beautifully aligned with him that it enabled him to exude all those things? Again, so this gets back to, hey, the different jobs require different types of leaders. So could that same personality or same person lead in a different industry, say?
I think you said it best. There's so many factors. There's so many traits. There's so many circumstances. Context means so much. If you take a successful leader in one situation and you move them to another, what are their chances? My experience has been they're not great. It's not guaranteed. We can see this all the time by looking at publicly traded companies where one CEO gets fired from a job, goes to another company, does great, and vice versa. There are all kinds of leaders. There are all kinds of circumstances. I think Don has maybe he not only does he have the perfect setup, but maybe his personality was also perfect for that setup.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to just...
Brian, back to you. Oh, Margaret, back to you. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just intrigued by this discussion, and I think I was pulling up your document because as I reflect on what I'm hearing the two of you talk about, it almost seems as though where you're ending up, Pat, is what, the title of your study was around how leaders use self-awareness. So maybe that's really, and we've talked a lot about how complicated this arena is. And there's so many different links between different concepts. And I think you, in your conversations with Terry, ended up with how you reconciled all these different ideas, because it's about this idea of self-awareness and using feedback. And maybe that's the overarching thing that, and so maybe that's at least a concept that might transcend to other cultures and other professions where authenticity is about this, the Goffman's notion of impression management. There's huge variance depending on your profession and depending on your culture. But what we know we need leaders to do is to have a level of awareness.
Thank you, Margaret. Yes, I was really looking at self-awareness and using authenticity as a framework. It became quite a bit more of a subject than I think I was planning, and I think I decided to make it give it some importance. But the self-awareness piece is maybe a little something that's worthy of more attention, maybe more so than authentic behavior. And maybe it's more doable in the environment that we have.
Great, I would agree.
Margaret, unless you had more comment. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. I'm enjoying the conversation and feedback also. I'm going to save my commentary for maybe a little bit later. At this point, I would like to open the floor up to any questions for any of our guests. We do have several guests that you have invited to this wonderful defense, and I want to provide them an opportunity if they had a question or so that they want, or question and or comment, I guess, at this point to make, and we'll take a few minutes for that, and then we'll move to the next phase.
Anybody have any questions? No?
This is Tanya. Pat, I want to congratulate you. You did a great job today. And I don't have any questions for you, but I just wanted to say that I've learned so much about your field and particularly about authenticity in your field through reading your work and through this presentation today. So I just want to commend you for your presentation today and say thank you for including me in your work.
Thank you, Tanya. Couldn't have done a lot of this without you. Tanya's been my study partner.
That's right. So again, congratulations for getting through this step.
Okay, other questions?